Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Coach's Journey podcast. Robbie here, and also,
I'm here too.
this is Ruth Saville. And very good to have you here, Ruth. I remember when when I kind of had the idea to bring in the team of hosts, one of the things that I was massively relieved about was that I would never have to do a solo episode of the podcast ever again unless I really wanted to. And I
Okay.
do not want to. Because what I found is those solo episodes, and if people go back to them, there's a few of them, like one about the Coach's Journey community, one about the 12-minute method, there's even the ones where it's like bringing together a bunch of short videos and content that I've made before. They were exhausting. And so I always try not to do exhausting things in my business. So great to have you here. Thanks for being here.
You're welcome. I'm glad I can make it less exhausting.
Yes.
Hopefully.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe that
Uh,
won't work at all. And it's actually just me being the center of attention on my own podcast is something that I find exhausting. But knowing myself, I don't think that's the case. So everybody, welcome to the show. We're going to start a short series of episodes that Ruth and I are going to make together that are going to come out over the next few months, diving into the Coaching Business Flywheel. And some of you will know that it's about 6 months since I launched that idea. I've been thinking about it for much longer than that. And over those 6 months, I have delivered it at workshops. I've talked about it on other podcasts. I've used it in Coach's Journey community calls and with clients. But like we thought it was really about time we brought it to the podcast feed in a deep way, or a deeper way than we had so far. And so that's in a way what we're going to do. So we're going to do an episode today where we're going to talk about the origins of the flywheel as a model, and what it might mean kind of on a high level for us all as coaches. And then in the rest of the series is going to be, I think, 5 more episodes where we're going to get in each one into one part of the flywheel. And if you have no idea what the flywheel is yet, we'll get to that. But also you might want to head to thecoachesjourney.com and either get the free ebook, An Introduction to the Coaching Business Flywheel, or just go to the Coaching Business Flywheel page and you'll get an image of it. I'll show it on the video so that when the video version goes up on YouTube, you should be able to see it there. But if you're listening somewhere, and we'll put a link to the YouTube channel and all of that stuff in the show notes. But if you're listening, you might want to just pause what you're doing, as long as it's not driving down the motorway, and have a look at that visual, just because it brings it to life a little bit more, I think, doesn't it, Ruth?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's important to be able to see it.
Yeah. So what we'll do first is I'm going to tell a little bit of the story about the flywheel and where it came from. And then we've got Ruth here to make sure that I don't get boring, and also that, that I don't go on too long, but also to kind of bring it to life by asking questions. And also, actually, one of the things I was thinking about before this is, when I did a challenge in 2022 to appear on 100 podcasts. And I really noticed actually the difference between the ones where I was listened to really, really well and the ones where I wasn't. And again, one of those was super energizing and one of them was fine, but not as energizing. So Ruth's also going to be here to provide
Yeah, no pressure.
beautiful coaching presence, as you always do. So let's slow it down. So really the origin of the Coaching Business Flywheel is that I was listening to Jim Collins, who wrote the book Good to Great, being interviewed. I think it was on the Tim Ferriss show. No, it definitely wasn't on the Tim Ferriss show, years ago. And people who don't know Jim Collins, very interesting guy. Essentially, as I understand it, I've never actually read Good to Great, but in Good to Great, the work that he and his team did is they looked at organizations that went essentially from good to great, from performing well to doing extraordinary things, and tried to find out what are the things that these organizations are all doing. And from that work, as I understand it, emerged this concept, the flywheel, which he then was promoting on the Tim Ferriss show in some ways. There's a short book on the flywheel, which I have got. But in a way, Collins just explaining this idea got me really excited. And I think partly it got me excited by that way that every time it sounds like someone might be giving you the secret to effortless success, you kind of really want to hear that thing and jump on it. And because the idea of the flywheel is essentially that you can create for any business or identify a kind of virtuous cycle of success. So the example he gives, which I just basically stick into the ebook, the Introduction to the Coaching Business Flywheel that you can get on the website, is from Amazon. And it's a good example because no matter what you think about Amazon, most people are familiar with the business model, are familiar with how it works, they've used it. And the idea with the Amazon flywheel, in really brief, so you can imagine with all these flywheels, essentially they're a clock face with a set of arrows going from part of the aspect of the flywheel to aspect, taking you around in a circle back to the top. And the idea is, if you put energy into the flywheel in any place, it'll gradually build momentum in the business. And it'll store the momentum. As you put energy into the flywheel, that is stored not just for now, but for the long term. And the concept of the flywheel comes from engineering or weaving, or, and so it's essentially a what you call it, like a mechanical process where you put momentum in and it stores it for use in the future. I mean, you can Google it, and if you're an engineer listening and I've butchered that explanation, then please let me know, because then I can make it better next time. But essentially for Amazon, so it might look something like this. I'm going to do it really fast because you can look at this in the ebook or read Jim Collins's books. The top of the flywheel would be lower prices on more offerings. So if you have lower prices on more offerings, you almost can't help but increase customer visits. And the language of the flywheel that I just love is that almost can't help but. That's the thing that changes everything. That makes it like, okay, if I do enough of this, I almost can't help but have the next thing that I want. So if I have lower prices or more offerings, if I'm Amazon, I almost can't help but have more customers there, because word of mouth will get round. People want to buy stuff cheaper. That's really all Amazon are competing on mostly. They're not doing much, especially originally. They weren't doing much else. If you increase customer visits, you almost can't help but attract more third-party sellers. So if there's loads of people on Amazon and I sell some washing up liquid and I can sell it on Amazon, then I want it to be there because there's loads of people on Amazon. And if you have more third-party sellers, then you almost can't help but expand the store. So have more stuff available, expand the distribution, because there are more people selling in different places. And if you do that, you almost can't help but have increased revenues over your fixed costs. So i.e., if the costs don't change that much to have more third-party sellers on there, but you grow some revenues. And if you have more revenues per fixed costs, you almost can't help but offer lower prices on more offerings. Then you're back to the top of the flywheel and you're getting more customers, and the flywheel's gaining momentum. So you get then this idea, and it's like quite exciting. Like, I like it because it's it really just feels really smart. And it's like, oh, this is how someone like Amazon takes over the world, right? You set that kind of stuff up. And it turns out that they use it in lots of places in Amazon. And as you start talking to people about it, you find out that other businesses, Spotify, all these other businesses use flywheels in different ways in their business. Because once you've seen that concept, it's really interesting to think about and get some clear thinking. So I got super excited. I was like, okay, what's the flywheel for a coaching business? And then it took me, as I remember, it took me about 20 minutes. I went to have lunch, I thought about it, and then I was like, oh, I know what it is. Because I'd read The Prosperous Coach and I'd worked with Rich Litvin, and I had dived into that approach to building a coaching business. And they, in The Prosperous Coach, and certainly the way Rich was working with coaches at the time, they essentially use a flywheel. They don't talk about it in exactly that language. Rich talks a lot about lead indicators, which is essentially, it turns out in this case, it's the same thing. So a lead indicator would be, what are the things that happen? So there's something I want to happen, for example, me getting a client. A lead indicator would be, what are the things that happen in the process before I get a client? They have to happen, but they happen before I get a client. And a lag indicator is something that happens after I get the client to say yes. And so the lag indicator is money, but everyone is always tracking money in a coaching business. So a cool insight that I got from working with Rich was, stop focusing on the money coming in, because what I want to focus on, the things that are in my control, are the things that happen before the client says yes. And the Prosperous Coach, they have a framework for that. Connect, invite, create, propose. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about that, because actually we've got some other, there's a video where I talk about the Prosperous Coach flywheel. There's a recent podcast episode with me talking at Henley Business School where I talk about the Prosperous Coach flywheel in itself. You can also read about it in that ebook. And I thought I just got it then. And then also what was interesting, and this is the crucial for the flywheel story, is I thought I'd seen something more than just that. I thought I'd seen, but I was wrong. We'll get to this. I thought I'd seen that actually the Prosperous Coach flywheel was not just a flywheel for a coaching business. It was the only things that coaches had to do. And that if you didn't do them, you couldn't have a coaching business. And I was partially right about that, but not quite. But because I'm like a weird person who likes, probably it's like the part of me that studied maths.
Yeah.
Like I got really excited about the idea that we would have like a kind of two things going on here. That not only was it a flywheel for a coaching business, which it definitely is. And one of the reasons that Rich is so successful and that he helped me be more successful and lots of other coaches be more successful is he really helped me focus on what is essentially a flywheel, even though to the best of my knowledge, he's never called it that. And that is, if you connect with enough people, you almost can't help but invite more people to coaching sessions. If you invite more people to coaching sessions, you almost can't help but create more powerful coaching experiences. If you create more powerful coaching experiences, you almost can't help but make more proposals. If you do that, you almost can't help but coach more clients. And if you do that, you end up getting connected to more people by referral. So I thought I'd got this exciting thing, which was also what would we call it? Like a really grounded truth about a coaching business, like a kind of first principles thing, that if you don't do some of these things, you can't have a coaching business. And I actually taught this like that for probably like a year, including that Henley Business School workshop that we released as a podcast episode recently. And then I was in the Coaches Journey community. We have for the last 3 years, we've had an in-person workshop only for members. And I was teaching this at one of those, and then I looked at somebody who was there partway through it. And actually, I was talking to him about it recently, and he said he thinks he remembers this moment, right? This is this moment of me saying, these are the only things you have to do to create a coaching business. Well, I'm looking at one of the members of the community and realized that I hadn't done a bunch of the things in the prosperous coach approach with this person, and yet he was still a client. And that was actually like a
Slow down on that.
Yeah.
So you were looking at this person and you realized what?
So I don't think he'd mind us saying this. So this is David Norris, who's a member of the Coaches Journey community. So I was looking at David, and as I was saying, these are the only 5 things that you have to do to have a sustainable coaching business. And if you don't do them, you can't have a coaching business.
Okay.
And then I looked at him and I thought, well, hang on a sec. I obviously had a sinking feeling, because it's always a horrible feeling to realize that you're wrong and you're publicly wrong in front of people live in the moment. Unfortunately, sadly, I wasn't the high version of myself that I'd like to be. I didn't say, hang on a sec, I'm wrong. Let's work this out together in the moment. That's kind of, I'm a slow thinker in that respect, and I'm probably a little too embarrassed to do it. But I basically had the sinking feeling. I was like, oh, but wait a sec. David is here, and I have never invited him into a coaching conversation.
Okay.
In the way that the prosperous coach approach allows it. And he became a coaching client before I had created a powerful coaching experience with him. And he became a client when I had never made a proposal in the way that the prosperous coach suggests you make a proposal, i.e. you sit down with somebody and say, this is how I work. It costs X pounds to work with me for Y months. That one's a little gray. Like I'd kind of done that, but I'd done it only in writing. But I'd done it. I'd never done it. I'd never actively done it to him. Okay. So it was clear at this point that I was wrong, right? So one of the ways to prove things in maths is contradiction, right? Like you prove you're wrong by finding one example. You can disprove a theory by providing one example. You know it's not true as soon as you have one example that it's not true. So the prosperous coach approach can be looked at as a flywheel, and a really powerful flywheel. It's worth saying now that as somebody who's got a series of books about procrastination and finally doing things you want to do, the prosperous coach approach is an amazing thing, because it is, in my view, the most direct way of building a coaching business. It strips out all the unnecessary stuff and gets you mostly to doing the most effective way of building a coaching business. But after I got over my like, oh no, I was wrong publicly in a bunch of ways a load of times, what should I do about that? I was like, well, can I find it? Can I redefine this stuff so that it contains the prosperous coach approach, but it also contains how David was created as a client, and it also contains like everything I know about coaching businesses from, at that point, what are we talking, like for nearly 5 years of interviewing people on the coach's journey, and 7-8 years of working with clients who are coaches and helping them with their businesses and writing about it and all that kind of thing.
So how did David come to you as a client?
Right. So David came via the podcast. So he listened to the podcast. Somehow he found the podcast. He listened to it, and he joined the Coach's Journey community. And then he's a client of mine. And then he's at Coach's Journey community calls. In the end, he's at that intensive. And yeah, I've never spoken to him before he's paid me money.
Okay.
So in the end, I did some work, and I slowed down with it, and I tried to get some phrasing that contained the Coach's Journey, contained the prosperous coach, contained David, and contained the other ways I've seen people build coaching businesses. And that's when we get to the coaching business flywheel. And I think like if I had better, what would we say? Like if I was better at coining terms, there'd probably be some sharper language in this. But i.e., it's not as snappy as connect, invite, create, propose.
Yeah.
But what it does, I think, is a genuinely original contribution, which is I don't think there's any way to have a coaching business without a sustainable coaching business without doing each of the 5 things in the flywheel. And I'd love to be proved wrong. Now I've kind of got over that. I've genuinely publicly practiced this. So it's something I believe in. It's like a value of mine. I think there's not enough being publicly wrong in the world. There's not enough acceptance that it's a very valid thing to do to change your mind. So now that I've become comfortable with that, it's a great personal growth moment. I'd really love for someone to prove me wrong. So if anyone can do that, then please get in touch. And then what you'll see is a third iteration of this idea, and that's fantastic. And I'll be able to update the ebook and all that kind of thing. But it hasn't happened yet. And I've been doing this for about a year now with my ears, well, 6 months in this way, but a little longer in my thinking, with my ears pricked for how am I wrong here? Okay. So shall we do the flywheel now? Or is there anything else that's worth doing? Okay. Definitely. So I'm going to, let me get, so for those who are watching on YouTube, and if you didn't know you could watch on YouTube, now you do. Let me share my screen. Here we go. Here's the coaching business flywheel. So at the top of the flywheel, and it makes sense for it to be the top of the flywheel, and people will see echoes of the prosperous coach in all of this, because that was the starting point I had. I was like, I feel like I was almost right with the prosperous coach, that they had, that once I turned it into a flywheel, they had basically got it, but I wasn't quite. And so I was like, first of all, how do I make sure David is included? And second of all, are there any other things, any other people that, what would we say? Any other ways of building a coaching business that I know of that I need to make sure are included here? Actually, what happened was once I included David, I think I felt like I pretty much got it, other than getting the language right. So top of the flywheel, and it makes sense for it to be top. So this is like 12 o'clock in a clock face. Top of the flywheel is connect with people. So that's the same as what they had in the prosperous coach. Are you connecting with people? Like if you don't ever connect with people, I don't think you can have a sustainable coaching business. Like, where are the people you're working with coming from? How do you have them? How do they pay you? If you never connect with people, then I don't think you can have a coaching business. But if you connect with enough people, I think you almost can't help but have a coaching business, given some specifics about connecting with people. And this is why we're going to have an episode about each of these things, because we want to help you not just understand this model, but also use it as effective a way as possible. It is worth saying, I remember I was kind of talking about this. I think I was talking about it with Claire Pedrick on the Coaching In, and I just seen her post this great quote from a British statistician called George Box, where he says, all models are wrong, but some are useful. So it is worth saying that, right? This is a model. It doesn't contain everything about the world, but I think it's useful. So if you connect with people, you almost can't help but, and then we go round to about 2, 3 o'clock. And if you connect with enough people, you almost can't help but offer opportunities for people to experience you more. Now, the crucial thing here is offer. So we're not talking here about giving people that experience. We're talking about, as you connect with people, the opportunities, the chances for you to say, here's a way to experience me a little bit more. And that could be an invitation to a coaching session, but it could also be, someone connects with me, and like, I think this is quite interesting because
some of this could be the podcast, couldn't it?
Exactly right. So some of this can happen without you knowing. If you've created a body of work like I had by this point, for example, of David becoming a member of the community, if you've created a body of work, some of this can happen without you knowing. But mostly when we're thinking about this, and again, we'll get into this in the next episode, we're thinking about doing this for ourselves, building our business. We want to be thinking about the bits that we can actively do. But so someone connects me with David. David, he finds it on searching. Someone's listening to the podcast because someone says you should listen to this podcast. It's great. Or they find it on Apple somehow, or whatever it is. Then there's an opportunity for people to experience me more. There's more episodes. And those are offered somehow. They're on the website. It says, here's a podcast. I think it's good. Listen to it. Maybe you hear me on the Coaching In with Claire Pedrick. And in that episode, I say, also, if you like what you're hearing, come and listen to the podcast. So there's those offers, and they have to be happening. And if you're never on your website or in writing or in person saying, here's a way to experience me more, then I don't think you can have a coaching business, because how does someone become a client? Now that offer could be, here's a chemistry call. If it's Prosperous Coach, it's like, would you like to do some powerful coaching with me? Or it's like, here's my 12-minute blog that I've been writing for 8 years. Why don't you read it? Or like what happens with me quite a lot is I'll be messaging somebody on LinkedIn, so we'll have done the connection, and they'll say something, and I'll say, well, it's funny you should mention that. Here's a little blog of mine that you might find useful. And there's an offer to experience me more, right? But in my coaching business, I go direct. I love Prosperous Coach. So I'm mostly like, someone connects with me, they're interested in coaching. My first port of call, let's do some coaching. And that's the offer to experience me more. If you offer enough opportunities for people to experience you more, you almost can't help but, and now we're down around 5 o'clock on the clock phase, help people create insight. So that could be via a coaching session. It could be via a podcast episode. It could be in a blog. And at that stage, I think if you never create insight for people, you can't have a coaching business. I mean, in some ways, you could say that's the whole point of coaching, right? Is to create insight for people and then help them apply it in their life. If you help people create enough insight, though, I think you almost can't help but have a sustainable coaching business. So that could be a really good business plan. Help as many people as possible, create as much insight for themselves as possible. And if you do that enough, you almost can't help but have a coaching business. As long as at some point, and now we're around about 7 o'clock on the clock phase, you have to at some point tell people how you work, how much it costs, and how to pay you. So I did this at the end of every episode of the Coach's Journey for a while, pretty much. Here's the Coach's Journey community. Here's what it's like. Here's how much it costs. And it says, go to thecoachesjourney.com/community. For people who don't know, by the way, I should probably say that the Coach's Journey community is my flexible, affordable group coaching program for coaches. So it's an amazing place. Ruth's been a member at different times. In fact, all the host team have at different times. It's often the highlight of my month doing those group calls. You can find out more about it at thecoachesjourney.com/community. There we go, right? We're doing it live.
Seamless, Robbie.
Well, and I mean, it is worth saying that, like, as soon as this is created, right, I'm thinking about it all the time in my own business. So it's like, what are we doing here now, Ruth? We are helping people to create insight. And if we do that enough, and we tell them how to work with me, with us, we almost can't help but, if you tell enough people how you work, how much it costs, and how to pay, you almost can't help but work with clients. So now we're on the flywheel again at about, what is that, like 10 o'clock, 10 p.m. And if you work with enough clients, you almost can't help but connect with people because they'll tell people about your work in different ways. So there's one more arrow that appears that I think is important. So if you help people create insight, that will lead to people connecting with you. So there's an arrow then that runs from help people create insight to connect with people. Because again, what we want is to be connecting with more people. If your body of work or your powerful coaching session that you do with someone, or you're just so good in your chemistry call that someone loves you, even though they don't work with you, they might be sending more people your way. So then the flywheel, just to be really clear to people, connect with enough people, you almost can't help but offer opportunities for people to experience you more. If you offer enough opportunities, you almost can't help but help people create insight. If you help people create insight, you almost can't help but tell people how you work, how much it costs, and how to pay you. If you tell enough people about how you work and how to pay you, you almost can't help but work with more clients. And if you work with more clients, you almost can't help but connect with people. Now, a couple of quick things just to say, and then let's pause for breath before we kind of start to wrap up this episode in the next 5 minutes or so. The arrows are crucial. So, right, so if we think about on the flywheel, there are 5 points on the flywheel where there are practices you can create to take lots of action. That's what I did when I worked with my first coach, or well, my second coach really, Joel Monk. It's what I did when I worked with Rich Litvin in the Prosperous Coach Salon. It's like focus on, in some ways, doing these things, each of these things really well and as much as possible. In fact, like the work with clients bit, that was like one of the first things I saw when I was interviewing coaches way before the podcast. When I was talking to people I knew who'd run successful coaching businesses, was like, oh, they all somehow got a way to be connected with loads of people or to work with loads of clients. And that really helped them in their business. You know, Phil Bolton, who was in episode 2 of the podcast, worked with so many clients at Deloitte as an in-house coach that, you know, his whole coaching changed, and also he had such a body of work and ground of referrals. It didn't help everything, as he talks about in that episode 2 of the show. He spent a lot of time watching Bargain Hunt when he first set up his coaching business, but you know, it really changed things. So those 5 things can all be practices. You can spend an hour's coaching session on each one. You could spend a whole coaching engagement on each one, really getting into the depths of how you want to do it authentically and skillfully for you. And that's partly why we're going to do an episode on each one. But the arrows are also crucial. So how do we, that's in a way, that's the almost can't help but. So it's not quite true that if you connect with enough people, you have to have a coaching business. There are some things you can do to enable it to be more likely that each person you connect with, it's more likely that at some point you offer them an opportunity to experience you more. At some point, they become a coaching client or someone they know does. So the arrows are really important about this, to think about, you know, if for example, if you're connecting with a lot of people, but you don't have a lot of coaching clients, then you could slow down. You could think, well, is it to do with, are those people getting offered the opportunities to experience me more? Is that where it's breaking down? Is it breaking down where around helping people create insight? Is it breaking down, am I creating lots of insight with people? This is pretty common with coaches, but I'm just never giving them the chance to say yes because I'm too afraid to tell them how I work and how much it costs and how to pay me. Or is my work with clients, I think this is a crucial and really tricky one, is my work with clients not good enough? So that actually I'm not getting the referrals? Or is there something I'm just not saying to my clients so they don't know that I need referrals? Or am I actually not helping people create insight? You know, there's all these places that it can fall down, but if you pay attention to them all, you get this virtuous cycle. That's what I believe anyway. Let me stop the share so we can kind of see each other for these last 5 minutes or so. I guess there's probably a couple of things that I could say about how you could use the flywheel. So I could say something about that, but what are you noticing as we kind of get close to the end of this episode?
Just something that came up like out of the blue when you were talking was, and I guess it's a bit of a devil's advocate question, is like, how is this different from all the adverts that we get pumped at us through LinkedIn saying this is how you make a six-figure coaching business? And that just came into my head. Like, obviously I can intellectually look at that and realize why it's different, but I just think it's an interesting question.
Yeah, it is. Shall I answer it, or do you want to answer
it? Yeah, I'll try then. I think it's different because I think it might be something to do with the arrows. Like, you can't help but maybe that those 5 things are practical and tangible, as opposed to some hidden formula. I don't know. You might do it better than me.
Yeah, I think those things are true. I think, look, one of the things is that like, I'm not trying to take anyone's money right now. I mean, like, I'm happy for people to pay me. Like, this is part of a coaching business, but I'm giving people this because, and I'm saying, I think this will help you with your business. I'm not promising it. I'm certainly not saying it's easy. You know, I make a joke in the ebook, right? This isn't 6 steps to 6 figures in 6 weeks. This is like 5 steps to 5 figures if you're willing to work really hard over the next few years. And
I quite like that.
face your fear.
Figures.
Yeah, I mean, it is. Face your fears. Do you know, face your resistance. Like, each of these things, some of these things are likely to cause everybody listening, especially people who haven't spent a lot of time practicing them, which is most people, like some real resistance. Usually it's in the offering opportunities to experience. When I've done like some raise hands in workshops that I've run, usually the ones with most resistance are talking about money, tell people how you work, how much it costs, how to pay you, and offering opportunities to experience you more. Most people think they love creating insight. They think they love working with clients. And yeah, the third place on the highest resistance is connecting with people, probably. Like, so some people kind of hate that, and we'll get into that in the next episode. So one is that. Two is like, my feeling is all of those. So one of the ways to use the coaching business flywheel is when you're shopping, is as a consumer, as a coach. So all those people trying to sell you a six-figure business in 6 easy steps, check them against this. Like, what are they actually helping you with? Because if they've got a way that through their program, they're going to help you connect to 1,000 people who you think would be an amazing client, that might be a really good thing to spend some money on. Or if they're going to teach you really well how to talk about your money and your business, then that might be the best way to spend your money. But be really careful with it, right? Slow down and think, look, if someone's going to, you can use it as a consumer for everything. It's like, if someone's going to if you're going to spend a load of money as a coach on developing a website, like, just think, like, what part of the flywheel does that actually help me with? And is that the best way to spend $3,000, 500 quid, whatever it is? Like, is actually that the best way to do it? So I think one thing is we're not forcing people to have money in exchange for this thing, right? Another is it is a bigger model than most of those things that people are selling. It contains them. It's why this is why there are so many things like that out there, because there are many, many ways to do the things, do the 5 steps in the flywheel, right? You can do it by a great social media campaign. You can do it by the prosperous coach. You can do it in lots of different ways. The crucial step for any coach, really, if you buy what we're saying here about the flywheel, is to work out how you, as a listener, are going to do each of these things in a way that is authentic to you. And my view would be, follow your strengths, follow what you love, do the things do it the way you want to do it, but you have to do these things. And the places where you feel the most resistance, like, I really believe this is a kind of butchering of a Steve Pressfield quote. The places you feel the most resistance are the most important for your soul's evolution. So we have this, I'll just say it again, actually. The places where you feel the most resistance are the places that are most important for your soul's evolution. So if you are willing to confront the fear and discomfort of offering people opportunities to experience you more, then you will transform. And I think we're super lucky. One of the things when I was looking at this model is, I think we're super lucky to have this as the flywheel for our business. Because essentially what I did working with Joel and then with Rich is practice these 5 things really well. And if you slow down and look at them, they are 5 really great things to practice if you want to have a life well lived. Like, most people would love to be better at connecting with people in a meaningful way. I certainly would have, especially when I was single, right? Like, I'm lonely as a young person. Like, it would have been great. I found it really hard, and I've practiced it so much over the last 10 years that I don't find it hard in the same way. I still do find it hard sometimes, but I don't always find it hard. Offering people opportunities to experience you more, kind of that open invitation to say, I've got this thing. It might be interesting to you. Would you like to see it? Like, that's just a nice thing. We shouldn't be held like hostage by our fears about that. Helping people create insight. Most coaches would say they'd love to be better at doing that. Talking about money. Money is like just a part of our universe. And better to, like, we can pretend it's not, you can pretend you hate it, but actually life's just better if you remember that money's just a measure of value. And if you get good at talking about it, like, you can manage your money better. Like, that's just a really useful thing. And you can value yourself correctly instead of lying to yourself, which is what we mostly do when we're starting out about how much we're worth, because we are uncomfortable with it. We tell ourselves we're not worth much by telling our clients that we're not worth much. Just lying to ourselves about how much we're worth the whole time. Imagine if we could actually value ourselves at what we're valued at, and do that by practicing talking about money and how much it works. And what if we could get to work with clients more? Like, every coach knows they want to do that, right? All 5 of these things are amazing. So it's also different, because what we're saying here is practice doing these 5 things. We think if you do these 5 things enough, you'll have a sustainable coaching business. But even if you don't, you'll have a better life, because these things are all part of a life well lived.
Well, I think that's a really good place to finish, Robbie.
Yeah, it does feel like it, doesn't it? So let's say a couple of things. We are going to get into connections in the next episode in this series. It won't be the next episode in the podcast, but it'll come out pretty soon. What's coming up in the Coach's Journey. So pretty soon will be the September Coach's Journey community call. It's a good time to join if you're curious, because you can join for the September call for £20 a month. That means, and come along to that call. And if you don't like it, then you can just quit. And that's one of the fascinating experiments about the Coach's Journey community. But also, actually, it's a really good time to join at that level, because you get 2 calls in 3 months. So for £60, you can come to 2 of these community calls. And we can get into any and all of this on the call. On each call is a chance for everybody to be coached who wants to be. And so we can get into these things together. You can bring your questions and also be connected to some amazing coaches. Anything you want to say about the community in this moment, Ruth?
Just that, you have those moments in the community where someone else brings something to the call that they want to be coached on, and all of a sudden it becomes what you needed to hear, like, even without knowing it. And I think you can think with the group coaching that you have to be being coached to get the value, but without a doubt, I often will get the better insights from listening to other people being coached.
Yeah, it's partly why I love working in that way. And so I learned it from various group coaching or supervision experiences I had. Just like it's the best way to learn everything about coaching as fast as possible. Because, in the Coaching Journey community calls, at the Diamond membership level, there's usually more than 10 people there these days. And that means you got like 10 times the chance. Like, if everybody brings their most pressing issue in their coaching business, you learn about 10 of the most pressing issues in one call. Yeah, I love that. I love that part of it.
It's just like that magic and the synchronicity. I don't know. It always brings what you need to hear.
It is funny, isn't it? It is kind of magical sometimes. We had a cool, be out soon as an episode as well, but it's already on YouTube. We recorded one for YouTube, an extra call from the Coaching Journey community last year. And one of my favorite things about it is that thing happened. That thing that you and I know happens in those calls all the time, where there's like outrageous levels of synchronicity between the people there that it just feels like magic. And it happened in that call, which was really beautiful. The other thing to say is, going to get to connections in the next episode, but usually when I advise people to put energy into the flywheel where they're starting off, I advise them to start with offering opportunities. And because the most direct way, and we'll get into this in the 3rd episode in this kind of series, the most direct way of offering experiences is to invite people into coaching conversations, because that's the incredibly powerful experience of you if you're coaching somebody. So I usually advise coaches who are starting out to start with invitations. And if you want to get access to the invitations that I sent, and still send these days sometimes, but that I sent a lot to get my coaching business off the ground, you can actually buy them these days. You can find out more about that in the ebook, The Coaching Business Flywheel. It's called the Coaching Business Flywheel Booster Pack. Sign up to that have a look at that on the website and that kind of thing, or get in touch if you've got any questions about that. You also get a discount on that if you become a member of the community. It's actually slightly cheaper to become a Diamond member and then buy it. But then you get the call thrown in. So
in the booster pack, there's actual kind of templates of invitations.
Exactly right. So it's not just that, it's the whole infrastructure of my business, basically. All the emails I ever send are in there. There's a flow chart, and we can talk more about this in another episode, but in there, crucially, the best bits in there, and I decided to guarantee it. I think those invitation emails are so powerful that if people send 40 of them, and after a year, they don't think those 40 invitations have paid for the flywheel in learning or in money or in something else, have paid for the booster pack, then I'll give them the money back or I'll coach them for a session. So it's guaranteed. So there's no risk. All you've got to do is buy a thing and then be brave enough to send 40 emails. But everybody listening has sent 40 emails in their life, so I can't see why it would be difficult. But of course, that's the beauty of coaching, that not everything that looks easy.
And that's what we'll get into on the next one, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. We'll get into that. Ruth, thanks so much for this. It's been super fun to dive into it. And we'll see you all on the Coach's Journey podcast sometime soon.
Thanks, Robbie.